21st century Australia is about putting the power back in the hands of the voters, which is what a true democracy is meant to be. As an example, we should be able to vote online for major policy in this country. I'm not interested in just starting a political party or just being a politician. If I didn't believe that we can change the entire political system, then I would not waste my time, money and energy. I believe we can do that. We're saying in 9 years or less, we want to be a major political party and political force in this country in 9 years or less. Nothing changes if nothing changes, but most people are fed up with the lack of change. Enough is enough. We're over the political surface. We are a rich country that should be managed properly, and we have a future, and it's a future worth investing in, and we need decent people there with a PhD in results in Canberra to transform this country and achieve its full potential. What we're talking about here is common sense, strategic, intelligent strategies and solutions for the country. And you talk to the average person out there and they'll say the same thing. That's all we need, is some common sense in Canberra. And that's what we'll deliver. What I'm excited about when you look into policy, I mean, we have a 25-point plan. I know some of you already read that. One of our policies is to review the level of state government. We have a university study done from Canberra that's in our policy document. The removal of state governments, as an example, which would take a 9-year phase-out strategy, would save $20 billion per annum to the public sector. It would save $40 billion to the private sector. It would save another $50 billion a year to the economy. Other things such as a fast train network. For those who've been to China, they build their infrastructure ahead of time. Unfortunately in Australia, we build it behind time. And we need to learn a lot. Instead of being egotistical towards China, there's a lot we can learn off the Chinese as far as building a country and building infrastructure, and we should be open to learning off other countries. We need to implement a major policy, a 21st century modern day education into our school and university systems. If Australian children at school were taught a real life education based on a modern day world, taught by people with a PhD in results, then we would transform this country. The pathway to prosperity for a nation is the same pathway we're talking about here today. By providing the right type of education, it is the pathway to not only financial success, but emotional fulfillment and having a more richer and happier society. It can be delivered, will be delivered, and must be delivered for this country, and we do not need extra money to do it. We need to act now, because if we don't, the question should be thinking, who is? Who is in this country? What other top-level entrepreneurs in this country are going to sacrifice and dedicate the time to make a positive difference? Most of them won't. If the message is resonating, the only thing we have to do is reach most Australians and give them that legitimate third-party choice. Yeah, unfortunately, it's true that the AEC, and they confirmed this morning that the 21st Australia Party will not be in the September 7th election. We suspect that they would not allow us as a result of inquiries, and I think it's a very sad day for democracy as a result of their actions. There's no reason we shouldn't be on the ballot paper. We're a registered party, but the AEC has chosen not to put us on the ballot paper. Well, I think like a lot of voters, and we've got hundreds of thousands of supporters for 21st Century Australia around the country, but even just supporters that don't necessarily support what we stand for, but supporters of democracy have every reason to be angry and upset that why they've been denied the legitimate democratic right to be able to vote for their party of choice. And I think there's a lot of efforts gone in by our candidates, our Senate candidates right around the country, our lower house candidates, our volunteers, our team. A massive amount of efforts gone into being in this election, and to have the AEC deliberately prevent that from happening, I think it's a very sad day for democracy. Well, I would suggest the AEC is one or two reasons why we're not in this election. One is either gross incompetence, and that many government departments are hopelessly bureaucratic, and the inertia of government, which is part of the problem with this country that we want to fix, is this sheer wastage and inefficiencies and lack of productivity in government departments. But I think we're being too light on the AEC if we say it's just gross incompetence, because they were competent enough to approve 54 other minor parties for this election. Many of those parties, including the Palmer Party, which submitted their application well after we submitted ours. yet they were quickly approved in the space of 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. The question has to be asked then, if they were competent enough to do that. The only other suggestion is that why they haven't put us in this election is we're suggesting it was done deliberately to delay and prevent 21st Century Australia being on this year's a ballot paper for a September 7th election. Why might they want to do that? Well, I've been warned by many people that the AEC is full of Labor stooges that are sympathetic to Labor, and 21st Century Australia, whose publicly stated aims has been to become a significant third-party force in this country, and Labor voters have been moving across to us in droves, and we were the greater threat to the Labor Party because, one, we're not likely to preference them, and we're likely to preference a coalition ahead of the Labor Party. So if we took 400,000-500,000, possibly as many as 1 million voters at this election, that would be more than enough to ensure that the Labor Party was not re-elected to power. So I think that's part of the reason. Well, I think what the public needs to know is that if we have a democracy, then it certainly doesn't appear that way. Why is it that a legitimate third-party force is prevented from being on the ballot paper that is anti-democratic in a country that is meant to be, a democratic country? But many people suspect that our political systems are manipulated or even perhaps corrupted. So I don't think it'd be any great surprise to many Australian voters that something like this has deliberately happened to prevent the only real legitimate third-party force coming to power. So I don't think they're surprised. What can people do? If they go to our website, 21stcenturyaustralia.com.au, we have a letter there that they're welcome, a complaint letter to send in to the AEC. If we can swamp with their AEC with thousands and tens of thousands of Australian supporters around this country, and we have supporters even from overseas, then maybe we may be able to force the AEC to do the right thing and add us to the ballot paper. Also, you can send the letter into the Governor-General. But I think you really just want to get out there and spread the word and highlight this injustice that's preventing many Australians from able to vote for a legitimate third party come this election. Or many Australians, even as I said, they don't support our particular policies. Most Australians support a democracy, and they hate being dictated to, and they hate political interference at the government level, the AEC level, to stop a party being on the ballot paper. And a lot of people are very upset and angry about that, and I would encourage people to take a stand. Apathy is what's destroying our country, and we've got both major parties. It's a political duopoly. They've been in power before most of us were born, and unless we do something about it, there will remain Labor and Liberal duopoly until the day that we die. This was one of the small opportunities that we had to break that duopoly and create a significant third-party force, and as a party we are still committed to that, even though this injustice has occurred, even though there's been deliberate actions and deliberate political interference to prevent us being on the ballot paper for September 7th election. But we always state it, within 9 years or less we intend being a major third-party force in this country, and we will continue to do that. It's unfortunate though that these dirty tricks campaigns and things have been occurring to prevent us being in this election, because there's a lot of voters that now are saying they refuse to vote in this election because the party they wanted to vote for is not going to be in the election, and they're sick of having to be fed up and have no choice other than vote pretty much for Labor or Liberal. The other thing that I would add is just to I guess, educate people a little bit about the process and how they have deliberately created a situation to prevent this. To be a registered political party in the country, all you need is 500 members that are on the electoral roll. We submitted our application on May 2nd this year, 12 days before the May 14th cutoff for the September 14th election that originally was set down by the Gillard government. So we submitted on time. We only formed the party at the beginning of April, so in a space of 30 days, there's an enormous amount of effort went in to launch the party and to recruit 500 members. The party to this day has closer to 1,000 members and growing. So we had more than enough members to be a registered party. What should take a couple of days by the AEC to quickly cross-check those 500 members. You're only allowed to submit 550 members. If you have 700, 800, 1,000 members, you're not allowed to submit the whole lot. They limit that you can only submit 550 members, which is also part of them making it difficult, if not impossible, mathematically, to be quickly accepted, because at 550 members, if they can't find more than 50 of those members on the electoral roll, then your party application application will be delayed or stopped. Now, the reality is the AEC database is so inaccurate and flawed, it's a probably 20-25% margin for error. So many people we know that are on the electoral roll, they can't locate, they can't find. Actually, go to the AEC database right now and try and find yourself on the electoral roll, and many of you will find that even though you are a registered voter, you don't exist on the electoral roll. That's how flawed their database is. So to try and cross-check that your members are registered voters is almost a complete waste of time, because the AEC database is so inaccurate and so flawed. Therefore, after weeks and weeks, or literally months, they come back to us and say they could only find 419 of our original 550 members submitted on the electoral roll. Can you please resubmit some more? So we had to now resubmit 550 new applications, taking weeks to do this, and they go through and take weeks and weeks and weeks, all wasting valuable time, what should be done in a day, to cross-check. This is taking now months for them to do. These go-slow tactics employed by the AEC, I suggest deliberately, because they had no intent of registering us in time to be on the ballot paper. They could then only find 483 members, only 17 short of the 500 required. Remember, we're only allowed to give them 550 at any given time. We're not allowed to give them another 200 or 300 so they could quickly ensure that they could find 500 on the electoral roll. 17 short. Now, at this point in time, common sense would dictate, if they wanted us to be in this election, they would simply say, can you please send through 17 more members so we can quickly, in the next day or two, cross-check them off that you have your 500 members and we can register as a political party. No, that certainly didn't happen. At this point in time, we were already fed up of being delayed months and months. The AEC sends us a letter that's quite threatening and saying, we have now rejected your application because we can only find 483 members and not the 500 that's required. If you wish to appeal this decision, you can, and we will not hear it until after the election. I mean, what sort of bureaucratic nonsense is this? Is that not deliberate actions to ensure we're not on the ballot paper? Or the other choice given to us was you can resubmit and start an entire new application all over again. Now it's already gone several months of their delaying tactics. And at that point, we have to pay the application fee again and start from scratch again when we've already, time has been wasted by the AEC. That is a deliberate ploy when they could simply say, please send us 17 more members through and register the party so it'd be in the election. To say there's anything other than deliberate actions, just in that instance, amongst all the other instances of delaying tactics, then you've got to be kidding yourself. So once again, we do all that, and we're eventually, weeks later, they eventually get off their butt, they approve the 500, then they have to do 30 random phone calls, and then that takes even more time. And they eventually could find no other technicalities or no other reasons. I mean, there's a limit to how much you basically bullshit and delay the registration of a party, and they accept that they can't bullshit us anymore. They have to finally accept the registration of our party, because it's a democratic country. You can't deny a legitimate party running an election. So we're registered on July 15th, and we celebrated that finally, after 11 long weeks of something that should take no more than 2 or 3 days to quickly check 500 names are on a database and randomly phone 30 people, after 11 long weeks, we were added to the AEC website as a registered party on July 15th this year, which was reported widely across the Australian media. However, perhaps we celebrated too soon, because we're then informed later by different sources, don't trust the AEC. Just because you registered doesn't mean you're going to be on the ballot paper. They will still ensure that you're not. And what we found out is that at the time you register, they take 30 days for submissions where people can object, but there's no legitimate objections to a political party other than the name being already taken. And then they require another 33 days after that before you'll be on the ballot paper. So effectively 2 more months before you can run an election. Once again, these are deliberate policies, deliberate systems, deliberate bureaucratic setups to prevent new emerging parties even being in an election. So once again, those tactics are deliberate. I mean, it's not accidental that it's set up this way. So once again, we were going to either election on September 14th. Remember, what they needed to do, and to ensure that we were not in a September 14th election, which was the date that Gillard originally set, or they already knew, like most Australians knew, but the AEC definitely knew, if Rudd was returned to power, that he would most probably call an early election. So that was well known. That's not, you don't have to be an Einstein to figure that out. So they needed to ensure that we would not be an election held September 14th or sooner. Is it just coincidental that the very date that they allowed our registration, the date that they could no longer push us back anymore, was Monday, July 15th? Take 60 days, 2 months beyond that date, and what date do you get? You get September 15th. It means that you will not be on the ballot paper for a September 14th or earlier election. Hallelujah. Is that coincidental? I don't think so. To suggest there's anything other than gross incompetence, I think that's being easy on the AEC. It's more than gross incompetence. It's a deliberate tactic, deliberate delays, deliberate action to ensure that 21st century Australia's emerging third-party threat to the two-party duopoly in this country was never ever going to be in this election if they had their way to do something about it. So I think that's appalling. We're demanding an investigation into the bias policies and the interference by the AEC into democracy in this country, and it's time Australian voters took a stand and standed up to the bullshit duopoly, political duopoly in this country, and the processes that are in place by government departments to prevent an illegitimate third-party force coming to power. Yeah, I just want to thank the thousands and thousands of messages that have been coming in from right around this country. I really also feel for all our candidates in the Senate and lower house. I mean, they put an enormous amount of effort in to wanting to represent voters and taxpayers in this country. So I really do feel for them and the team and our supporters, because it's a major letdown. I'm certainly very disappointed about it. All we're asking for is democracy, to be on the ballot paper. We're not asking for anything more than that. And I think in a country, most voters, a large percentage of voters would think that that's more than fair, and would be asking the same question, why aren't we? And the AEC can spin it all they like, but we have enough evidence to suggest that it was deliberate and deliberate tactics employed against us to prevent us being on the ballot paper, and that's just grossly unfair, and Australians should take a stand for that. And certainly, we didn't think this would ever happen in our country, and it's quite disturbing to think that it has.
He has purpose, he has drive, and he's passionate about education and also passionate about the people in this country. Can you please welcome to the stage with me my friend and my mentor, Mr. Jamie McIntyre. Okay, I'm just gonna get right into it, okay? Explain to all of us, what is the 21st Century Australian Party all about?
Yeah, initially it was started as a movement, not as a political party, to help out. Many of you know that I've been an educator for 15 years. Those who are familiar with 20th century education, I know some of you here today, here for the very first time, is that we have always, my goal has been, we recognise the education system we have in this country is designed in the 19th century. It's heavily outdated. We now live in the 21st century. We need a modern day 21st century education system. To me, that's fairly common sense, and that's been my life purpose for the last 15 years. To help implement that and share that with people. Now we've educated over 550,000 people from over 17 countries around the world, and that's just getting started. But 21st Century Australia as a movement is not just about a strong education platform for this country, because increased education leads to future prosperity for everyone in this country. It's also about the challenge we face is that we have a 19th century outdated, flawed political system in this country that was designed 200 years ago. That's no longer serving Australians in today's world. So we need a modern day 21st century education, a 21st century political system. And I'll give you an example, Eric, how that would look is, most voters are disillusioned in Australia at the moment. They're not overly happy with our current Prime Minister and Ms Gillard, and they're not overly excited about the alternative either. So many Australians are just disillusioned. A lot of people say Australians are actually apathetic when it comes to politics, but I don't believe that to be true. I think deep down Australians actually really do care about their country. They do care about policies. They just don't, they're fed up with the political circus we see in Canberra, and they want to be able to have a real say. 21st century Australia is about putting the power back in the hands of the voters, which is what a true democracy is meant to be. As an example, we should be able to vote online for major policy in this country, and with We Get Our Way, that will be the future. You'll be able to, for major policy, go online and vote. So instead of politicians deciding on major policy. We as voters get to decide. That's a 21st century initiative. There's software available today to prevent fraudulent voting, which would enable that to happen. We want to see government spending, the $360 billion a year in tax revenue this country generates, put in the hands of an independent board. As we've seen, when it left to inept politicians, a large amount of that money has been wasted. We've experienced a $250 billion debt run up in the last 5 years of this current government, despite going through one of the greatest commodities booms in the history of this country. Unlike Norway and unlike Dubai that have sovereign wealth funds and money put aside for a future, Australia has none of that put aside. We've squandered. We are a rich country that through poor financial management and poor quality political leaders in this country has seen most of that money squandered. And many Australians are quite annoyed by that because the social contract is it not? We work hard, produce for the country, and we pay taxes in return. The government's meant to look after that money responsibly and deliver services. Is that fair enough? When we feel that they waste the money, they're self-interested, we go, why are we paying all this tax? Why are we paying even more tax? That social contract, that trust in our government institutions starts to break down. And that's why we have the situation where we have in this country right now, where most voters are disillusioned, disenfranchised, and are basically fed up. So 21st century Australia is about moving the political system and education systems into the modern world and restoring the power back to the hands of the voters that a true democracy is meant to be all about.
So I've known you for about 4 years, and in knowing you, I found that your interest has been in the financial education side of things. What was the catalyst, or what was it that drove you to making a line in the sand and saying, right now, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do something about the current situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I used to think that, I was actually talking to Arnie about this last night in Perth, and by the way, Arnie's very excited to be in Australia. We had an awesome event last night in Perth, and he's really pumped. I was so impressed with the delivery of his presentation. You're going to love him tonight. But obviously we're talking about politics as well. And he said when he decided to run for governor, most of his friends thought he was crazy. I feel a little bit the same way. A lot of my friends thought, you're crazy, you have a great life, you have great freedoms, you're already running 12 companies, how do you find the time now to enter into politics? And I always thought, Eric, you had to have grey hair before you entered into politics. And one of my advisors said, Jamie, doesn't matter, don't worry about that, doesn't matter what age you enter into politics, you'll soon get grey hair. So really it was 10, 15 years' time. I thought maybe after I achieved many of the things that I set out to do that I would enter into the political game. But like many Australian voters, as a voter, we've become so fed up with the political circus in Canberra that we realise if we do not act now, then we may never have another time in the history of Australian politics where we have the chance to create a political revolution. Thanks to the internet and social media, which is disrupting many industries, it has the possibility to disrupt the political industry in Australia, which has two major parties continually controlling everything that happens in this country. So I decided, and my team, to go, you know what? It's no point of us as Australians, if we care about our future, just to whinge and whine and bitch and moan about the lack of alternative we have come September. We have to actually do something about it. It's the same thing. I remember being at university studying accountancy. I was frustrated with what I was learning at university. I said to my mother at the time, I said, why isn't there a university to teach you how to be successful in life? And it wasn't many years later, a decade later, I started 21st Century Education. And it really come from learning from a mentor. And he said, Jamie, if you want to change the world, if you want to find out what you really should do, find the things that annoy you most and then go about doing something to solve them. And many of us are annoyed by our current lack of political talent in our political system, but we can't just talk about it, we have to actually do something about it. So we made a decision only 9 weeks ago to launch 21st Century Australia Party, and I had no idea at that time the amount of support that we would get around this country. Never in the history of this country has a political force started, Eric, that has already 600,000 supporters behind us Australian-wide. And never before in the political history of this country have we had the opportunity through social media and the internet to disrupt the two major parties in this country. So we decided to commit to that. It's a serious commitment, and we'll be fielding candidates Australia-wide, at least 75 plus lower house seats. So no matter where you live in Australia, most of you will be able to vote for us in the lower house if that's what you want to be a part of. Certainly in the Senate, everyone in this country, in the Senate at least, will be able to support a change and help us become a legitimate third-party force in this country.
Now, you're running against Tony Windsor and Barnaby Joyce for the seat of New England. Tell us a little bit about the whole dynamics and the support that you've had in that area, your thoughts, your chances on how the result will be, and what are the key central issues in that particular region.
Yeah, I'm sure most of us here would, even if you're not really into politics, would be familiar with who Tony Windsor is and Rob Oakeshott. They were the two independents that betrayed not only their electorates, but I believe betrayed an entire nation. I'll give an example. New England is where I grew up. So my family is still there. I have invested heavily in the New England area, Glen Innes, Armidale, Tamworth. So if I was going to run somewhere in Australia, I'd want to run where I've spent most of my life and where I'm passionately connected to. That seat is probably the most hotly contested seat. If I wanted an easy, safe seat, as they talk about in politics, I certainly wouldn't run in New England. It's probably the most difficult seat in the entire country to win. Tony Windsor, what really annoyed me, those who don't remember back to 2010 when we had a hung parliament, if you understand a little about New England, it's a rural electorate. They don't vote Labor in most rural electorates. Only 8% of New England supported Labor, 92% voted against Labor, yet Tony Windsor, as an independent, somehow made up a decision to go, I'm not really sure who I support, despite a week before being re-elected by New England voters. He goes and betrays them and puts, obviously, Gillard into power, despite what his electorate wanted. And I think that's one of the greatest political betrayals in the history of this country. I was overseas at the time. I was so ropeable about that. I said at the time I will fund $250,000 to see that he's never re-elected in 2013. At the time I didn't envisage that I would actually run against him, but a lot changes in 3 years. And one of the reasons I'm running now is because that sort of betrayal against voters is what's everything that's wrong with our political system, and that's everything we need to change to put the power back in the hands of the voters. So when you as a voter say this is what you want, that's what you should get. It should not be other people dictating to you what you have to put up with. So to give an example, though, in New England, the media's in for a lot of shock as well, and a lot of people are. I mean, Tony Windsor's still thinking that he's going to win, but Australian Spectator did an independent poll only last weekend, and Tony Windsor's after preferences support has dropped from 66% when he won that seat in 2010, and is down to only 10.7%. Barnaby Joyce is the favourite at 38%, and already after 9 weeks of starting campaigning, we're up to 33 to 34% support in the seat of New England, and it's on the cards to be one of the greatest political upsets in the history of this country if we can continue with the support that we have.
Well, one word has come out through the various speakers this morning, and it was Julia Gillard, our Prime Minister, with ties. I chose to wear a black tie. What are your thoughts on our Prime Minister, the job that she's done, where she's taking the country, and your overall opinion of what needs to be done, what changes need to be made?
Yeah, I'm sure I'd be one of 23 million people in Australia that have an opinion on the performance of our current Prime Minister. We did a 21st Century News online poll, which is still running, and you're welcome to vote on it. Out of 900 people that have voted on it so far, that obviously 21st Century subscribers, a large percentage of those, only 6% of people support the Gillard government. Something like 40% support what we're doing already, and 44% for the coalition. It goes to say, if we look into those statistics, that people that are financially educated, motivated in this country, are into personal development and evolving, tend not to support the Gillard government, and are certainly open to change. What can I say? I'm not going to personally attack her. Plenty of other people can do that. The issue is, though, she's run a government that has mismanaged this country. As I said, we're a rich country, $250 billion in debt, despite going through one of the greatest commodities booms. All they've done is increase taxes, add more taxes to fill the budget black holes. I mean, you've got to ask the question is this: Julia Gillard, Wayne Swan, what credentials do they have to run a $1.4 trillion economy? What have they achieved in real life? Have they ever created a job? Have they ever started a business? Have they ever worked out there in a real job? The reality is no. Would Wayne Swan, as Treasurer of this country, when he finishes up in politics, and sooner the better, be hired by any top-level company as a CFO or CEO in this country? Absolutely not, because he doesn't have the credentials. Yet these people are managing your taxpayers' money, and we wonder why it's been wasted. A rich country that should have better infrastructure, better services, better everything. We can have so much potential in this country because we are rich, but the money's being wasted. So her performance, she will go down, it's not my opinion, she'll probably go down as one of the worst performing prime ministers in the history of this country. She was never elected by the people. I was speaking to Arnie about this last night, and he was amazed at how in Australia we have such an unpopular prime minister. At the same time, we have such an unpopular opposition leader. It is a rare circumstance, but I think it's that people are just fed up. And people, some people say she's tough and she's determined. I think that's people are fooled. That's desperation. That's all they are. They are desperate and they will try everything. But they already have, and people aren't listening. So really, there is no longer a conversation that we really need to have about our current Prime Minister because no one's listening. That conversation is gone. What we want to know about is what's the future of this country and what we can do about it, and can we as a group of people work together to achieve the full potential, not only of what we're about here this weekend today is your individual success, but the collective success of the country. And I believe it's possible. I'm not interested in just starting a political party or just being a politician. If I didn't believe that we can change the entire political system, then I would not waste my time, money and energy. I believe we can do that, and I believe we have a great future if we can put people into power that actually have a PhD in results. Out of 226 MPs in this country, only 16% or 33 of them have entrepreneurial or executive board level management experience. John Howard said only a couple of weeks ago, and I agree with him, he said, I fear for Australian politics because most of them are career politicians. They've never worked a day in their life. They're elitism and into political snobbery. They don't connect with real life people. And Wayne Swan and Julia Gillard. Julia Gillard will retire with an $8 million equivalent super come September. Wayne Swan, $5.6 million. And for what? They would never have the hope of earning that money. They are not wealth creators, they're wealth takers. They'd have no ability in real life to be able to create that wealth, but that's what they'll get for destroying, economically, one of the greatest nations on the planet. And I think it's appalling.
So you mentioned about your long-term goals. How long do you anticipate it will take to make 21st Century a major party in this country?
Yeah, I mean, we're realistic. We're not like Clive Palmer, and good luck to Clive Palmer for having a go, and I guess we need more entrepreneurs out there. But when Clive's coming out and saying he's going to win 100 seats come September and be the next Prime Minister, I'm not sure about you, but that doesn't really resonate. I mean, it's just nonsense. We're realistic. We're saying in 9 years or less, we want to be a major political party and political force in this country in 9 years or less. However, I will say this, Eric, that I believe it can happen sooner, and that's entirely up to each and every one of us as voters. We have the opportunity through social media, through the internet, to disrupt the political elite and make that possible in a shorter period of time. And speaking to Australians and out there, campaigning around this country, the amount of support we're getting at a grassroots level is massive, and it's spreading rapidly. And I think there is a chance. There is, I'm not kidding ourselves how difficult it is, but there is a chance to really turn this September election on its head by taking massive amount of voters away from both the major parties and sending a clear message to Canberra that enough is enough. We're over the political circus. We are a rich country that should be managed properly, and we have a future, and it's a future worth investing in, and we need decent people there with a PhD in results in Canberra to transform this country and achieve its full potential.
With the amount of negative perception in the electorate about politics and politicians, what separates or differentiates Jamie McIntyre, the party, in what you want to put out there?
Yeah, I mean, the response we've had is massive because even though we're entering the political arena, we're not seen as political in that sense. I mean, because we represent the voters. We're saying, hang on a minute, most of us are fed up with the alternatives. Most of us have had enough. We want democracy restored in this country. We don't just want the illusion of democracy where you're given a so-called two choices, which is just if we continue to repeat this pattern, Labor coalition. I mean, how long have we been doing that for? Are we going to break that pattern and do something different? And I believe because we are focused, and we are focused on gaining power to restore the power to voters, then we're seen in the light that we should be seen in, as something very different to a typical political party. And I think the difference is this. is that in order to lead people, and Arnie will talk about it tonight as well, is that, and I'll talk about it as well later tonight because I think it's a very good lesson for all of us. If you look at someone like Clive Palmer, I mean, Clive Palmer may have great intentions, but the challenge is the feeling that I get is Clive is driven more by significance than contribution. And you can't lead people when you come from significance ahead of contribution. We already have enough egos in Canberra, is that true? We already have a political circus in Canberra without someone else adding to that. To lead people, you must first sacrifice and be willing to focus on contribution ahead of significance. Mother Teresa was very powerful because she focused on contribution. She wasn't interested in significance. To lead this country, to create leadership in this country, we need people there for the right reasons, are there to contribute and make this country better, are not there for egotistical reasons or financial reasons or other reasons. And I think that is a big difference because you can't fool people. Australian voters are smart and they've been taken for granted by the two major parties who just expect your vote. And I think Australian voters are ready to make some serious political change in this country, and that's the feedback that I've been getting.
So, you mentioned Clive, and I had a person on Facebook actually ask me a question, and it was, what was the difference between Clive and Jamie McIntyre? And I just typed back, about 50 kilos.
I would add a few zeros as well, but you know, as I said, I think Clive, it's good. I mean, we want to encourage entrepreneurs to run, and good on him for having a go. But I think he's had a lot of media space that he's really squandered that. You can't buy votes. I don't care if you're a billionaire, you're not going to buy votes. Australian voters aren't stupid. They're fed up with trying to be bribed and bought votes by the current government. They're not really open to being bought. And as I said, you have to really come from contribution. If Clive decided to focus on contribution and had a 10, 20-year plan and had detailed policy documents like we have a 50-page policy document on 25-point plan, blueprint for the future of this country. You can download that at 21stcenturyaustralia.com.au. We have a regional policy document, 74-page policy document. We have detailed policies. What surprises me, Eric, is why can't a billionaire party do that? Why can't this current government have a 25-point blueprint plan for the future running of this country that doesn't just involve increasing taxes and creating more taxes? It's not actually very difficult. What we're talking about here is common sense, strategic, intelligent strategies and solutions for the country. And if you talk to the average person out there, and they'll say the same thing, that's all we need is some common sense in Canberra, and that's what we'll deliver.
One of the things that I've heard you talk about over the past 5 years is about modeling and having mentors and being able to relate and have someone who has done it. Now, Arnold Schwarzenegger is in town, in that political arena. Would you say that he's been an influence of someone who has orchestrated you into your mindset of getting into the political campaign? Is he a mentor?
Yeah, it's a good question. The media continually ask this question, and they're like, well, I mean, yeah, I would say he is. I mean, Arnie achieved a lot in politics, and we'll talk about some of those things tonight. You remember Arnold Schwarzenegger was, his political mentors were the Kennedy family, and I don't think you can have better political mentors than that. So he has been a handy resource in that. But just to clarify, and the media asked me this yesterday, is that when I decided to bring Arnold Schwarzenegger to Australia, it was decided last year. I had no idea that I'd be entering into the political arena, so the two are not linked in that sense. But yeah, he is a mentor. I admire many people. I mean, I always thought Bill Clinton was a great president as well. I thought people such as Bob Hawke in this country, not to be political biased, did a great job as well for the country. So Malcolm Turnbull, I think, would be a far better Prime Minister than the current choices. So there is some people there that I look up to and I think you can learn off. And I think political mentors are important. I think this country needs a far more aspiring political leaders than what we currently have got. And it would be good if Julia Gillard and Wayne Swan come to this event today, not only to get a financial education to better manage our country, but perhaps to learn some political advice that Arnie's happy to dish out to them tonight.
Right.
But I'm not sure they're listening. I'm not sure they've been listening ever since they come to office, and that's why she will not be the Prime Minister of this country for very much longer. Right.
Mark Burrows and Stephen Molnair, and even speaking to you over the short amount of time and what you've talked about on your homestead, you've talked about Australia being rich in resources, and there's great technology boom that is happening here. I've noticed in some of your policies and some of the things that you've been saying, you've got some ideas about Australia Post becoming a bank. You've had some ideas about fast rail in Geelong or in Brisbane. What are your thoughts on how that can get done within your party?
Yeah, what I'm excited about when you look into policy, I mean, we have a 25-point plan. I know some of you already read that, but go to 20th Century Australia, you can download it. But some of those things include simple things like turning Australia Post into banks, so we have a fifth bank that could provide taxpayer reduced home loans. I mean, the 85% of the mortgage market is controlled by the top 4 banks. Other things such as a fast train network. Those who've been to China and studied this over the years and looking at the infrastructure they have there and the fast train network, etc., and even the fast broadband things, they build their infrastructure ahead of time. Unfortunately, in Australia, we build it behind time. And we need to learn a lot instead of being egotistical towards China. There's a lot we can learn off the Chinese as far as building a country and building infrastructure, and we should be open to learning off other countries. Yes, we want a fast train network. We don't want to wait 9 or 10 years or 65 years, this current government talks about. China can build that in 5 years. Why can't we start in 5 years? A fast train network in this country would, when we talk about lower the cost of living, Australia has a high cost of living, which is a major challenge to everyone. It costs $3.1 billion for infrastructure for every 50,000 households in a city like Melbourne. It costs only $1 billion to put them in the country, regional Australia. If there was a fast train network, people can live in regional Australia for a fraction of the price and be in quick, short distance to the cities and still work in the cities. Things like that are innovative, are possible. We have a whole host of strategies, and they all can be funded. And when I tell you where they can be funded from, is the sheer wastage of money in the 3 levels of government in this country. One of our policies is to review the level of state government. We have a university study done from Canberra that's in our policy document that by the removal of state governments in this country, the UK has only 2 levels of government and they have 60 million people. We have 3 levels of government and only 23 million people. We're over-governed. We're a nanny state. The removal of state governments, as an example, which would take a 9-year phase-out strategy, would save $20 billion per annum to the public sector. It would save $40 billion to the private sector. It would save another $50 billion a year to the economy. So things like that have to be put on the agenda. Jeff Kennett's very supportive of that. There's other people in this country. So there's innovative ideas there that can completely transform this country and restore the money back to taxpayers, to where it should be going, not into bureaucracy, not in these fat cat managers that have $100,000 a year jobs that don't need to be there. Are just put there because private sector jobs since 2008 have only grown by $279,000. This current government claims have created jobs. Yeah, they've created jobs, all right. 409,000 jobs have been created in the public service since 2008 at a rate of 60% increase versus 20% in the private sector. That's a great way of creating jobs. That's just buying votes using billions of dollars of taxpayers' money that's wasted. And that's what happens in this country when a country needs to be run as a business. It needs to be run as a business, but a business with compassionate capitalism, what I stand for, where we take care of the people that can't look after themselves, the vulnerable people in society, but the people that can look after themselves, instead of giving them welfare and a handout, we want to give a hand up. Instead of welfare, let's put the money into business grants, startup grants for small business. How many new entrepreneurs can we create with a $5 or $10 or $15, $20,000 startup grant? That will transform a country and create jobs, not doling out welfare for people that could get off their backside and have a go and contribute to this country, but don't want to. They're not the people we need to look after. We need to encourage people to become more responsible for themselves, and that's what today is all about, being financially responsible for yourselves and not relying on government to take care of us.
I've just got 2 more questions. This question relates to what you have done. I've seen you over the past 4 to 5 years organize youth events for teenagers, large auditoriums. You shelled out resources, time, people, money to empower young people. And you did that because you wanted to teach our future generation. As a politician, as someone who's coming into the political arena, what is it that you want to create for our generation that's coming up right now in schools right across Australia? And how will you best do that?
Yeah, I mean, the goal is pretty simple in that sense, Eric, is that we need to implement a major policy is a 21st century modern day education into our school and university systems. We do not need one extra cent of revenue from Canberra to do this. And if I'm elected to New England, we will start in the region of New England implementing this, and New England will become the benchmark, the education capital of this country, and then that will be rolled out Australia-wide. We do not need, a lot of governments just want to throw money at things and think that solves the problem. We already have enough money to transform this country. So that can be implemented, must be implemented. If Australian children at school were taught a real-life education based on a modern-day world, taught by people with a PhD in results, then we would transform this country. The pathway to prosperity for a nation is the same pathway we're talking about here today, the same pathway that Arnold will share in his story, how he got himself self-educated. What you're doing here today, getting yourself self-educated. By providing the right type of education, it is the pathway to not only financial success, but emotional fulfillment and having a more richer and happier society. It's common sense. It can be delivered, will be delivered, and must be delivered for this country, and we do not need extra money to do it. Pouring billions of dollars into a flawed, outdated education system is simply wasting billions of more dollars, and that's what this current Prime Minister wants to do. We don't need to do that. We just need to scrap the education and start with one designed for today's world. That's when we'll see results. Until that happens, we're just wasting our time and money.
So, my last question is a question that I would say would be maybe a question that's on the minds of people sitting in the audience right now. So I am an Australian taxpayer. I'm an Australian citizen. I vote. I've been in this country for 32 years. Next Friday, I am going to be a grandfather.
Congratulations.
In saying that, you made a comment about we need to take action now. This election that's coming up now is the springboard, the platform for what happens in generations. I go home tonight and I talk to my daughter and I said, right, in September, you need to vote for the 21st Century Australian Party because of what? So this question will be for people in the audience, when they go and they talk to other people about what they heard from you and about what you want to deliver and your passion and your energy and what you stand for, okay? What is a defining statement that they're going to deliver to people about why they should cast their vote, not for the major parties, but for this party?
Yeah, it's a good question. The way that I would look at it is this, because I think it's best not to try and convince people. It's best to give people choices. And what I would say, Eric, and those who want to support this cause or want to find out more, and if it resonates with you and you want to be a part of that, is simply to say, people, if you don't want to have to vote for Gillard or Abbott, maybe you want to check out 21st Century Australia and send them to our website. Then they can download our policy documents, they can watch the videos, and they can make up their own mind. It's not about convincing people. Everyone has a right to vote, and we want to encourage people to vote. If they resonate with what we're talking about, then by all means, it's up to the voters. We don't determine the future of this country. We can only be a catalyst. You do as a voter, and you do by sharing the word with other voters. That's what it comes down to. Many Australian voters don't realise the power they have. We've given away our power. We need to take that power back and have a real say in the running of this country. And 21st Century Australia is the only organisation that's interested in getting power for the one sole purpose, is to return that power to the Australian voters. Every other party is simply after power for the sake of power to themselves. Just like the current two parties, what they tried to get away with only 3 weeks ago was pass through Parliament an extra $50 million in funding for the major parties, with a drawdown of millions of dollars that before this election, because they know there is emerging parties such as us that are growing in support around this country where we have no government funding. This campaign, which will cost between $3 and $5 million to run, is purely funded by myself and my supporters, yet this government wanted to get through millions of dollars of your taxpayers' money to keep them in power, why they can't even manage your taxpayers' money. And I think that's an appalling thing that they did, and they almost got away with it. It was only because enough voters stood up to it and said, that's crap, we're not going to tolerate that, and it was stopped. So all I say to people, if you want to spread the word, we are looking for more candidates. We've announced 12 candidates already Australia-wide. We have over 100 that have applied. We want to field at least 75 candidates in the lower house seats around Australia. If you want to have a go and become a candidate, you can apply to do that. We also need supporters spreading the word, but social media is where this election will be won, and spread the word and just say, look, if you don't want to vote for either of the major parties, check out 21st Century Australia and let them make up their own minds. And I think that's all that has to be done to make a difference in this country, because the people that are hearing about us are getting excited about politics for some people the very first time. The message is resonating. The only thing we have to do is reach most Australians before September and give them that legitimate third-party choice.
Any closing statements, closing remarks that you would like to leave in parting?
Other than that, we all have the opportunity. The one thing I would say is this: if we as a country fail in the next few months to help create a political revolution in this country, we may miss the only opportunity that we may have in 50 to 100 years to transform this country. And if we miss that window of opportunity, what is the long-term cost, not only to ourselves, but to our children and our grandchildren? We must realise that. We must not devalue our vote. We have a rare, unique opportunity. Most campaigns are 30 days. This has been a 5-month campaign. It is the most unique opportunity we may ever be presented with in the history of Australian politics. We have a chance, you and I as voters, to take a stand. And the question is, if we don't, then who are we to blame? Who are we to blame? But if we do, then together, I'm very excited about the future of this country and what can be done with people like you and I, the people that are passionate, are dedicated, care about the country, want to make a difference, and are prepared to get out there and make a difference.